Welcome to the Working Fans Podcast. Find us on Twitter. We're at Fans Working. If you want to follow us on Instagram, we're at Working Fans Wrestling _pod. I am the pro. I'm AJ Strangebrew. We've got the producer Joe, who's going to be working with us, and my co-host and guiding light, Dave's the biggest fan I know. That music that played us in today, that was actually brought to us by our producer. I'm going to let him tell you all about it. Joe, who is that?
That is Nick Caution, and the song is Warning Signs. It popped up in my new music list on Apple Music. When I hear music like that, I expect it. There will either be the Smoke DZA Ringside series, where he specifically turns wrestling theme songs into songs. This one caught me by surprise, and I just wanted to share it with everybody as our wrestling and pop culture.
No, Joe, that's great music, and it gets us fired up and heading in the right direction. And that direction that we're going to start off with first is going to be brought to you by Dave. That's going to be our news of the week.
Welcome, everybody, to the last episode of 2019. Last week, you heard us go over our history in our own words. And this week, I kind of wanted to do that more with the episodes we've recorded. When we first started recording, we sent out a couple demo episodes to friends just to see if what we were doing would be worth it. So from that first episode, we have a sample intro and how I was looking to do wrestling and culture at that time. Being a big hip-hop fan, a lot of those songs I had planned on working in. Obviously, the one problem being we don't own any copyrights. So that was something that had to quickly be forgotten. Another segment was something we wanted to do with This Week in Wrestling History. On this particular episode, Dave had recapped a particularly bad Halloween Havoc, I believe. And also, we have a couple 5-3-1s in there for you. Couple early ones, we did the top 5 super heavyweights, the top 5 women that changed wrestling as we know it, and the top 5 wrestlers not in the Hall of Fame. I, in general, wanted to structure this episode like our episodes usually flow, but put in these historic segments. And we also have the Matt Coon lost audio drop. I never use this because I didn't want to bury Matt Coon for giving the wrong name, or AJ for how the situation was handled, or myself for not prepping better. But if there was ever an episode to put this piece of audio, it is right here. So thank you for listening to us in 2019. We have big dreams for 2020, and we hope you're all there. And like we said, if everybody that listened could please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'd very much appreciate it. So happy New Year, and enjoy 2020.
Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
Welcome back for another week of the Working Fans Podcast. This is AJ. I'm the former wrestler. We've got Dave, the ultimate fan, here with us. As we do every week, our producer Joe likes to make us sound good and makes us look way more professional than we actually are. As always, you can find us on Twitter, that's at Fans Working, Facebook, Working Fans Pod. We've got email where you can reach out to us, and please contact us to let us know what you think of the podcast and for any ideas that you might have. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram where you can keep up with us at workingfanswrestling _pod. And then you can now listen to us on all major platforms, including Anchor.fm. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, and you can actually check us out on YouTube. Now, it's important when you go onto the Apple Podcasts and YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a rating, let us know what you think so you can help us out and we can continue to do what we love and bring you guys in as fans.
If you're listening to this podcast right now, the Working Fans Podcast, then Happy New Year to you. And we know you can listen to other podcasts, but thanks for taking the time to listen to this one, man. I mean, hey, I love podcasts myself, and I'll be listening. So don't think you have to be an AEW guy or a WWE guy or girl. You know what? You
100%.
Watch and just watch some fucking wrestling and enjoy it for what it is. You don't have to, just because you like one doesn't mean you have to hate the other.
100%.
You know what? Don't watch that. If you don't like it, don't watch it. Watch what you like, because there's a lot more to choose from now.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Matt.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. That's is there any way we can get just a little soundbite, just something, a little
This is Matt Kuhn, and you're listening to the Working Fans Podcast.
There you go. He made it simple for me. Sorry.
That's all right.
Say it again.
So basically, this is something like I'm Matt Kuhn, and you're listening to the Working Fans Podcast.
Oh, sure. Hey, everybody, this is Matt Kuhn, and you are listening to the Working Man's Podcast.
All right, Matt, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. You're the best.
All right, no problem at all. Thanks, guys, and let me know when it's up, and I'll retweet it and all that stuff for you guys.
All right, Matt, thank you so much.
Very much.
Hey, thanks, guys. You guys have a great night, okay?
You too, Matt. Thank you.
Matt.
All right, thanks.
This is the Blue Thunder J. Freddy, Tokyo, USA, Pro Wrestling Worldwide, Pro Wrestler, and you are listening to the Working Fans Podcast. Yeah!
Yo, this is number one, John Silver. I'm talking about the Meat Man. I'm talking about that big boy. And of course, I'm talking about the Raw Dog. And you're listening to the Working Fans Podcast.
Consumers, this is Richard Holiday, the most marketable man in wrestling and the AirPod God. And you are listening to the Consumers Working Podcast. Just kidding. It's the Working Fans Podcast.
This is Roy Lucier, and you're listening to the Working Fans Podcast.
Hey, it's Jason Agnew from Sunday Night's Main Event, and you are listening to the Working Fans Podcast.
Hello, everybody. It's former WWE superstar Al Snow, and you're listening to the Working Fan Podcast.
This is Amanda Steel, Mike Vernon, and you are listening to the Working Fans Podcast, a hell of a podcast, everything wrestling, everything life. Do yourself a favor, check this out.
Hey, wrestling fans, this is Mr. Technical Barry Horowitz. When I listen to the finest podcast, I listen to the Working Fans Podcast. It is supreme, because I said so.
Hey, this is Bobby Blaze, former Smoky Mountain Heavyweight Champion, and you're listening to the Working Fans Podcast.
Working Fans Podcast. This is a solo Joe interview, and if you can hear my voice reverberating, we are in the depths of the burnt basement.
That's right.
And I'm here with Shef. How's it going tonight, Shef?
I'm good. I just had a day. I was rushing around, going about 600 miles an hour, but I'm glad. This is actually the first time I'm sitting down relaxing. I sat down at work, but then somebody chased me out, so yeah. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it's the annual Christmas party here at the BBPL.
That's right.
For anybody not familiar, tell us a little bit about the BBPL and how it came about.
Well, the BBPL stands for Burnt Basement Pong League. It's been taking place in my grandmother's basement for 7 years, technically, with some start and stop, but 7 years.
And, kind of describe it, because when I tell people about it, it's kind of like beer pong meets pro wrestling.
Right. That's pretty much the gist of it. It's been different people to start or be through it, but me and Tom were the first two to start it, along with a couple other people.
Was Jesse anywhere in that mix, or did he come later?
Yeah, no, Jesse was there.
That's Jesse from New Hampshire, for regular listeners.
Yeah, it started off I played beer pong maybe once or twice, and I just couldn't get into it. And then people hanging out in the basement, hanging out on Fridays. Oh, let's play beer pong. Sure, whatever. And it just snowballed and snowballed. And Jesse was the one to introduce belts, because this was about 10, 12 years after the fact. Me and Jesse were almost crippling each other in our backyards for those same belts, but Jesse had them still from his childhood. So he's like, yeah, let's get belts involved. So that's where the wrestling aspect kind of came into it. And that sort of snowballed. Instead of just belts, just grew to friggin' storylines and angles and now
promos on the page.
Right, and then one day it was like, all right, well, we got promotions. So, yeah.
And it's a good time. I mean, you guys welcomed me in. It's got to be, 5-6 years ago now?
I think, yeah. What was it, 14?
I can't remember the exact year, but I remember, I started working with Don at Stop and Shop, and then he knew I liked wrestling, so eventually I started talking to you.
Right.
And it just grew. Now, when did you first become a fan of wrestling?
I had this conversation before, someone a few weeks ago, or days ago. I'm not one of those people, I've beaten my brain up a lot, physically, chemically, over the years, so I can't tell you the pinpoint moment I started watching. I'm jealous of those people. It's like, oh, it was, you know, Shawn versus Owen that very moment. But I really can't.
I just remember Hogan on TV. Like,
Right.
I can't remember a specific year. But, you know, like, I can pinpoint it to maybe when Hogan was big. But I remember seeing him on TV and thinking, like, wow. Not getting into it till, like, maybe that late WCW 80s, 90s. Like, right before it switched over to the Nitro era.
Uh-huh.
So, like, that's about where I can pinpoint it to. But that's...
I can remember the era. I can't remember the specific moment that got me hooked.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's about, like, the early Nitro era, like I'd say, is when Shawn was still the hardcore stripper. Taker was still, like, you know, the purple zombie. Brett, I mean, for listeners too, Brett is my favorite of all time. And he is the greatest professional wrestler of all time. You can come find me on social media, and I'll argue that until the day is done.
Where can they find you, actually? We didn't even promote that off the top.
Instagram is at tshef92, TSHEF. Yeah, that's how I spell it. Yep, 92. Twitter is Sheffer Side. It used to be Shefacide, like homicide, my take on that. No, but yeah, Sheffer Side. So yeah, and then social or Facebook, Tyler Sheffer. I'm friends with Joe. I follow Joe on everything. So if you find him, you can find me pretty quickly after that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I had to get you on because I heard you on the Thick and Sweaty podcast, I believe.
Thick and Sweaty, couple great people. Actually, we can connect something with Stefan, the guy on there. He was a former indie guy from Canada. He wrestled, I can't even think, maybe over 10 years. I think he started young, but he tells me some great stories. He worked with a lot of names too. He's from Winnipeg. He knew Kenny Omega in the early days. So in terms of people like you hear Jericho, Roddy Piper, Cyrus from Winnipeg, but he was around Omega a lot then too. So it's interesting from his perspective seeing someone who knew Omega then, and like, you know, obviously Omega is one of like the top wrestlers in the world.
It's almost like somebody from your high school blowing up.
Right. He's got some great stories, hilarious stories. I mean, he would be a gem on here, definitely.
Oh, I'd love to get him. Like, I listened to that episode, and they hooked me from their conversation before they even talked to you, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I subscribed immediately. I'm like, oh shit, this would be somebody to talk to.
Yeah, him and his lady shit, and Steph has his own wrestling-specific podcast on the side with another guy, Curtis Housen, who has a pretty successful memorabilia store in Canada. Pushes autographs, 8x10s, like fucking nothing. I mean, I'm not a sports guy outside of, I guess, MMA is technically, quote-unquote, the sport I would know. Anybody like that, baseball, football, firstrow.ca, if anybody needs some Canadian-sponsored memorabilia.
Now, you got into the tape trading game, I believe, early, right? Like, you said you were pretty young?
Well, I was lucky for where I live, still the same house I'm talking to you this from. The mall, about 5 minutes from me, had a Suncoast, which turned into FYE. And Suncoast, I'm sure a lot of listeners remember, this is
the Crystal Mall in Waterford.
Right.
See, I thought that used to be Suncoast, and what was it, Record Town that was at the other end of the mall? Like
Strawberries.
Really? The one that was like a shitty little...
Yeah.
Where you're like, I'm not going to that record store. That's basically a closet.
See, now my own memory's fucking with me, because I remember if it was I think it was Strawberries, not Suncoast.
I thought Strawberries turned into FYE.
Yeah, I think they
and then I can't remember what the other one was. It could be Record Town, could be fucking Suncoast. I bet it was one of each of these at some point.
Right, but reading the magazine, this is still like the early years of the internet, and I mean, if I messed around a computer like that when I was a kid, it'd be wrestling stuff anyway, but whichever store it was, I was reading in the magazines they were starting to advertise the FMW tapes that were getting shipped here. Tokyo Pop was putting them out. Like the base of it, because this is like ECW heyday, this is when ECW was on TNN, and my wrestling taste, I still loved Brett and Sean Ray, everybody, but I was really getting into violence, which, I mean, I'm lucky, you know, I was like 6-7 years old, but
this is about the same time you and Jesse were trying to cripple each other outside.
Right. Obviously I recognized Cactus, but then once you get into it, double barbed wire, because you know the adjectives with those old FMW death matches, double hell, barbed wire, dynamite, explosion, barricade, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, and you're like, what the fuck is that?
What the fuck does any of this mean besides barbed wire? So I started watching it. The first tape they put out, their King of the Deathmatch tape, For hardcore FMW people like this, they'll know it was the May 5th, 96 Kawasaki Stadium show.
God damn, you're going Roy Lucier deep on this.
I am. And the main event, well, another person, name I recognized, Terry Funk and Mr. Pogo versus two people that would become two of my all-time favorites, no matter what country, no matter what era, Hayabusa and Masato Tanaka. So you can imagine they had the whole gimmick, the two sides, barbed wire on the floor, explosion, the two sides, the time bomb after 15, 20 minutes. So I fucking fell in love with this. So I started picking up any FMW tape I could find, anything, everything. I don't know if this is the same time or a little bit later, Big Japan started putting stuff out to America. That was a whole other thing. A swig of Christmas Corona for the working man.
I was hoping the Steve Austin impression would come out.
So this is another thing. I wish I could remember the light bulb click in the moment, but getting online, I somehow came across a guy, and if he's out there, if anybody can locate this guy, please put me in contact with him, because Bahu, who does the FMW page now, I have friggin' sent that guy so many heartfelt drunk messages about, oh man, I was in 3rd grade, your site, I read everything, your site. And the guy's name's Brett. He's a huge Brett mark, too. So if you're out there, Bahu, let's talk about Hayabusa and Brett one day. So I ended up stumbling upon this guy, Sean Gold, Violent J Tapes from Florida. And again, too, I wish I could remember how the fuck these pieces came together. But I was getting Big Japan compilation tapes. I don't know, this had to be 2000. We'll say 2000. So about 7, 8 years old. And this shit.
Just to put that in perspective, I graduated high school in 2000.
So this stuff was coming out. And like I said, this wasn't the Attitude Era. I'd call it the tail end of the Attitude Era, but things were still hot.
Yeah, that'd be about right, because I remember the Attitude Era taking off when I stopped being interested in wrestling.
98. That's a whole other topic. I think 96, 97 had little sprinkles that led up to the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
Then by 98, it was full blown.
That was during high school, and I was really kind of like, fuck the world during that time. So, like, when exactly I fell off, I don't remember. I mean, I remember Hogan turning heel, and, like, maybe that was about the time, a little after that I was like, I'm good with this.
See,
like, the Monday Night War might have peaked. That's the cloud for me.
See, the fan I was still in high school, and, like, I don't blame people. Everyone's got different lives. My friend Jesse, too. I mean, Jesse's a lifelong fan, but he's gone out in spurts. I won't say I've never fallen out of love with wrestling, because I have. That's a whole other topic. That's a deep, deep drunk topic. No,
You've just never not followed to some degree.
Right. It's always been a force of habit for me a lot. And the only time I ever stopped paying attention to a lot of WWE stuff was when I was an angsty 13, 14-year-old who was like, oh, fuck Cena. I want Necro Butcher to stab Cena's fucking brains out. And then, I grew up a little bit after I saw Shawn carry Cena Cena put up his own in that 5-star Mania match, and then the hour one on Raw after in England. But, now I remember. So like I said, this was 2000, 2001. So Jesse, lifelong fan, Attitude Era. It's kind of like the Hogan kids, too, when it was that popular. People that didn't watch wrestling now watched it then. So this was, this was the era of, obviously, Austin, Rock, Trips, the Hardys, everybody, Taker. So I was still loving all that stuff. WCW, they were on their last leg, I think, by this point. So everyone's like, yeah, Rock, Austin, come to school. Y'all don't know shit till you see Mr. Pogo. No, I love New Jack. I feel like every fat white kid of my generation loves New Jack for one reason. And he doesn't like us if they're watching Mass Transit. No, but I was terrified to meet him thinking he wanted to kill me because he just looked like that. Yeah, so it was pretty nuts seeing that stuff, like the contrast of it. For me, I was just still at
and
the
it's
point.
Pretty wild that you like you grew up still liking the WWE, WWF, WCW, but then you're also getting this FMW, ECW at the same time.
Right, and that's what ECW was on the way out too.
Like, from your perspective, like, this year, wrestling has become so rich for people. Like, have you always had that variety, you think, with your generation? Because you're like 10 years younger than me so...
I think so. Between points of just, like, having different tastes growing up. But it's like nowadays...
And you grew up with TNA, too. It wasn't this thing that came along when you were older that you're like, ooh, I don't know if that's going to catch on.
Yeah. TNA ROH starting the same time too. That kind of smartened me up a lot. I think I've just kind of always been like that. There's a lot of stuff in terms of today's wrestling that's a whole I go back and forth on. Like I told you, Sire, it's I don't say it's a bad thing. I don't say like I hate it. But people ask me, why do you love wrestling and stuff like that? I mean, I'm sure I could give you an answer if I thought about it. I don't know sometimes. I know I like it. I know I'm still intrigued by a lot of stuff today, but I'm like, I don't know what even started too. Because
for me, sometimes I think it's storylines, the things they build, like just the way they tell stories. You see a character and you're like, I want to see how this guy finishes things.
Right,
out.
and I guess even to a lot of people too, that's all bagel these days. But in terms of, I've always had the taste. Yeah, it's still kind of the same thing today. Like I can watch Flair and Steamboat for an hour, turn around and watch Ray and Hoovy, turn around and watch Necro Butcher and Madman Pondo stab each other with glass.
And not complain about anything. Like, maybe we'll, like, clown on some stuff or, like, make a joke, but it's never like, oh, fuck this.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, message board arguments or that shit when you're younger. I'm at the point, too, not even wrestling, just in general, where, like, I don't have the energy to, like, argue and complain about something unless it's really worth it. I can see it for what it is now.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's why with this podcast, we focus more on stuff we like rather than things we see wrong.
Right.
We'll bring up something if we're just like, I'm not a big fan of that. But it's more focusing on the positive rather than on the negative.
Yeah, I don't try to say this in like an entitled way or it comes across like spoil or anything because there's so much fucking wrestling today. There is so much goddamn. I thought there was a lot just being in high school and like you grow up, you get busy with work, life, and everything. I thought I was like all over the place in high school. I'm like, oh shit, there's three. There's a big Japan show, a New Japan show, IWMA, torrent. Now I'm exhausted to the point where I'm like, I don't even know. There's so much. Like Mania weekend for me is that kind of revival weekend where I'm like 15. I'm gonna watch every freaking second of something in a ring this weekend. I don't give a fuck. And then after that, like, I just shut down again for a little bit because it's like, I got to process.
That can be exhausting, especially if you're keeping up with the NXT, the WrestleMania, the variety of shows that pop up from 11 a.m. to, 10 p.m.? Yeah, 2 a.m. if you got the... I've been to a couple of the Janela Spring Breaks, and those things are marathons.
I think social media is, like, a whole different perspective on wrestling now, too, because people... Like, I like Janela for the most part. I really do. I like his gimmick. I like how he's like an FMW, ECW disciple. He wants to keep carrying this on to the modern
I almost
day.
feel like he's a Cornette disciple in some way.
But you see stuff like that with Cornette or the pandering or this and that. And, like, I'm always the first to say, and I don't want to sound hypocritical. I will sound hypocritical. I'm always the first to say, you know, people bring up Dick Murdoch. Let's cancel Dick Murdoch from 30, 40 years ago. Because he was rumored a racist or this one. And then at the same time, the flip side, I'm like, I can still love Dick Murdoch, watch Dick Murdoch. Now with Janela, because I didn't follow Dick Murdoch on Twitter. So, but I can kind of see a little bit, like, you kind of get to know the person more. It's where you're like, yeah.
Is it kind of like the Benoit thing, too, where you have to separate the person from the tragedy or the controversy?
I think there's a lot of favoritism. I'll tell you this. If Lex Luger, who, I mean, I loved him when I was 4, but if Lex Luger would have killed his wife and kid that fucking June 2007, whatever.
R.I.P. Miss Elizabeth.
Well, all right. Okay, bad example. He did kill a woman, but, so...
I'll probably have to edit out that hard laugh.
Yeah, but if someone less desired or someone like that, or,
wouldn't that... But I don't know, does the tragedy elevate the worker? Because, like, for me it's tough because Benoit, hands down, awesome worker. That, I don't think can be argued.
Yeah.
The tragedy has clouded it so much, and, like, I don't know if over the years maybe it's raised his status in our minds because we haven't seen as much of his matches. We're going more on memory.
True. I think... this concussion thing, everything is so distorted, and like I said, social media, you see people you would never...
God, what about that one account you follow with that chick that loves Benoit?
Anybody on Instagram, go look up the page Chris Benoit Love You, just the letter U. There's a girl from Italy who is literally like it's funny until it gets fucking serious.
You've showed it to me, and it's sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's wow. This is a girl that would write Charles Manson if he were alive.
Right. And I mean, if Benoit didn't kill his family, maybe it wouldn't be like that. What about someone who dies of natural causes? Where's the Eddie Gilbert love you page? Where's the girl drawing pictures of Eddie Gilbert wanting to fuck his corpse? But and then you look at too the contrast. Look at Snuka.
Yeah, true.
Snuka, I don't know. Benoit's a touchy subject, I think, for everybody. Because, like, I'm one out of millions of people that follow this journey watching wrestling your whole life. And
yeah.
You think back, oh, Benoit gone. Like, I remember that day. And I can't tell you what happened the last 2 weeks. I remember finding that out when Benoit died. But, I don't know. Like, I was trying to corner back around with, like, the Murdoch thing. I guess with people's personalities and you see more of, like, that. Benoit is just, like, it's still mind-blowing for me, honestly.
Yeah.
And I feel like every deep fan who's watched long enough felt personally betrayed. Sometimes you talk about it like we knew him. Sometimes you talk about like we would be Malenko, you'd think, knowing him all these years and stuff like that. So, I don't know. It's such a... Do I think he should go in the Hall of Fame? No. I'm going to get anything out of the way with that. I think
we were making a case for it during that 1-5-3-1, and then... somebody smartly took him out of the equation. I would have put him in just because I feel like the work deserves some kind of recognition.
Yeah.
But the tragedy overshadows it. I understand.
And the thing, too, and I was going to wrap around this with tragedies, people like die in tragic circumstances like Owen or Mr. Perfect. Everyone says, oh, this person only gets praised because they're dead. But is it that the people died, but they were just good at what they did?
Yeah.
Obviously, dying is going to pump your legacy up a lot. But Kurt Hennig was like he proved he was good before he died. You know, obviously shit like that, Eddie and those guys, whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't even know if that answered the question you asked me. That kind of friggin' went off on the trail.
I was going to say, we kind of went off like a Grateful Dead jam where that just went 20 minutes.
But I'd like to think I kind of got my point across.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting close to when people are going to show up, but I think it's pretty wild because it was either here this year or last year that we talked about working on a podcast or starting one. And actually, the MLW review is kicking off next year.
That's big.
Yeah, the start of 2020. I'm starting with the old MLW tapes, eventually catching up with catching it live.
I feel like the old MLW's forgotten. Not by you, but I mean in general. I feel like some people kind of, they're remiss talking about the old one.
Oh, yeah, and we'll be watching it. We're going to talk a lot about that. We're hoping to have Burnt Basement featured in the new year.
That would be
because
great.
We've been talking about getting on a podcast long enough. Like, I think 2020 is going to be the year, so let's wrap this up.
I want two. I don't want to...
Oh, shit, yeah, we got to get you to promote.
I want 5 rapid-fire wrestling questions from Joe Sayart.
5 rapid-fire questions.
Maybe that will show, if there's a listener, that if I had to show my taste to somebody, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you. Let me think. They'll be rapid-fire once I can get an idea for it.
And in terms of favorite stuff like that, like I say, Brett's my favorite, because he's the guy who got me into. He was my favorite just from growing up little. I mean, favorite wrestler count. I mean, what's your top 10? I can give you 9. Once I get to number 10... oh, it's Barry Windham. It's Great Muta. It's fucking Sabu. So I'm fucking, so bear with me.
What was your first disappointment in wrestling? Like the first time that wrestling had let you down?
When Jeff, I don't know if this is the first, but this is the first I can really think of. Oh, actually, I remember crying Big Show when he was a Giant, kicking the shit out of Ray or something, or he chokeslammed Ray 6 million times or something. But I remember them stretching Ray out crying. And I remember when Jeff and Taker had their ladder match for the title on Raw, and I was like 9. I didn't really got that upset with wrestling in a long time. Jeff came. They told such a good story. Jeff came so close, like JR. He's touching it. He had his hands on the belt, getting ready to grab it, but he didn't win it. And I remember Big Evil Taker, which I felt betrayed because now he's a meth dealer on a motorcycle, and he's not trying to bury Kamala in a casket anymore. So I'm a little heated to begin with. Pulls the belt down. No, it's not the same couch we had, but I punched the back of the couch. Not broken, but I started crying. I was like, God damn it. But yeah, probably that, yeah. Of course, after that, the last time wrestling disappointed me, God, How many friggin' beers we got in the fridge? No.
Oh, tonight will be full of them. Second question, let's go with all-time favorite tag team, and why do you think you like them to the degree that you do?
Just from, it's a 1 and it's a 1A for me. It's the
That's
LOD
close enough, that's
and
fine.
the Steiners. And growing up as a kid, just because they were both top team, obviously LOD had the sickest fucking look. Everybody wanted their action figures. Everybody wanted the paint, everything. Just growing up like that, and now I look back, Steiner's legit for one of the best teams ever. If I'm going smarter picks when I'm older, Furnace and Profit, Can-Am Express, Midnight Express, Arn and Tully, you know. I'd love to see some more Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens everybody talks about, but that footage, they didn't have networks then, so.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
What do you think is the thing that you enjoyed most this year in wrestling?
The John Moxley story. Him leaving a job that he was fed up with, that he felt like he was caged. That's why he's one of my favorites today, too, as someone who saw him before the WWE Rise and after. A guy who, you can tell he's a smart worker. He's an old soul with wrestling like that. You know, his Terry Funk and his Piper influences. I think, yeah, the story of him finally getting out of a job that he felt like he was cuffed in, and now he's out and free, and you see him one night he does a death match. One night he's doing shoot style. He wants to face Josh Barnett. He's getting on a plane going to Japan. He's going to face this, and it's just, I think he's having an incredible run this year. I think also this year, if I really broke it down, maybe someone else, but I think just off the last month alone, Adam Cole's probably had the best match catalog in WWE this year.
Yeah.
Adam Cole has fucking killed at every chance they give him. What was it? They were stuck in Saudi Arabia. They needed him on a whim for SmackDown. He went out, put on that banger with Bryan. I think everything Adam Cole's done this year has been fucking phenomenal. So.
That's a real good one.
Yeah.
How far do you think wrestling's come in the last 5 years? And is it wild for you to see as a lifelong fan?
Styles-wise, I don't think it's evolved much in the last. I think the indies kind of, not hit a plateau, but I think they rose to a certain peak 2014, 2015 with quote-unquote flip. The indies now has the same variety the indies had 10, 15 years ago. Flips, death matches, submit. It's just different people in different places and different companies in different spots. Technology-wise, with networks and streaming and all this stuff, it has blown my mind. Where people with, like, you know, everyone used to look down, oh, they got a YouTube TV show, like, how low rate is that? Millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people are on YouTube to friggin' see anything and everything, wrestling or not. So technology-wise, it has blown my fucking mind, some shit going on.
I think Roy Lucier said the same thing, that just technology has made everything so much more accessible, and it's just, if you're one of those deep dive type people, you can look up anything.
Yeah, you used to have to pray to God at 3 a.m. You could find a bootleg stream on some foreign browser for the Dome show. Now you can watch it right fucking delivered to you, like, you know.
With English commentary.
Yeah, even if it is Kevin Kelly, it's still English commentary.
For the last question, if you were to have your own segment on a podcast, what would you talk about each week?
I like wrestling still today, but I feel like I'm better talking about things from the past. I feel like I could describe maybe like a past segment, or like I like Cornette's In the News on 605, how they pull out headlines and he reviews them. Yeah, probably stuff like that. Like, I've seen a lot of stuff the last 4 or 5 years, but I couldn't tell you, you know, every single, like, the match catalogs of, like, everyone on the indies, stuff like that. Pentagon, I love him. He's a guy I really just got into the last 2 or 3 years, seeing a lot of his stuff. So probably for something older. I like dream matches. I think it's fun to think about shit like that and why, where it could have happened, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, let's get you down for 2020 for the Burnt Basement section of the podcast, where
great.
We'll talk about it.
I like being able to show people something they might not have seen before, and if they come in thinking different, I mean, here's why it would be good, here's why it'd be different, you know, stuff like that. So. And
Shef runs our Instagram page because the rest of us are older and do not understand Instagram.
Yeah, I get on tab with that too. I gotta get friggin'. Do I got the pencil for that one? Yeah.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that official? Really?
Oh, that's in.
Oh fuck! All right. I've been disappointing everybody. Like I usually do in this but
we'll build it up for 2020, and
2020 is gonna be a big year.
But it's 6:05 right now. Let's get to drinking.
Fuck. Cheers.
Cheers, brother.
Folks, that was This Week in History.
And if you enjoyed that, going forward, we have a segment that is very unique to us. Our producer, Joe, actually came up with a brilliant idea. What's called the 531, which is going to be trademarked to our show and something only we're going to be doing. And I'm going to let Joe talk to you more about it right now.
531, it's going to be a debate segment that we developed because the top 3 lists that you see that anybody makes are your top 5, your top 3, your top 1. So individually, the 3 of us each came up with our top 5 list. The names that pop up in everybody's list or are more common will make it to the top 3 we debate. From those 3, 1 will be picked as the top 1 of whatever the topic or genre we're covering it. And it's basically a way for us to take the debate and kind of share it with you. So once we get done, we'll put it out into the ether, and then you guys respond to us on our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, telling us what your top 5 are, or what your top 3 are, or where we went wrong arriving at our top 1 answer. And this week, we're talking about the top 5 super heavyweights.
My top 5 was Andre the Giant, Bam Bam Bigelow, Vader, Big Show, and Yokozuna. No particular order there. Andre was my number 1, as we'll talk about later.
Yeah, so my list, guys, I think you'll be able to tell by regions where we grew up and by decades and time periods when we discuss these lists, who grew up where and when and with who. Because my top 5 consists of one of the best big men I've seen, Terry Gordy, Bam Bam Bigelow, Vader, Andre, and then I've got to give it up. One of the best big men that I've seen, Keith Lee, is coming down the pipe right now, and I'm very impressed so far.
For my top 5, I put Yokozuna, I got Vader on there, I got Earthquake, Tugboat, and then I finished it out with Abdullah the Butcher. When I'm thinking super heavyweight, I'm not going to say it's a tough term to really come down on what a super heavyweight is. You're looking for big, sizable people.
Sure.
I tried to take into consideration super heavyweight for their time period also. Because Terry Gordy, while he was a super heavyweight in his time period, going up against the size that he was, it was almost like if he was a super heavyweight going over and doing the British now. What's a super heavyweight in Britain right now is not necessarily a super heavyweight in the States.
Okay, fair enough, but like when I think of Gordy, there was still one-man gang in Kamala in those territories at that time.
And I actually
Andre.
But if you remember, he competed with those guys.
He did.
And went toe-for-toe with them. And when you look at the way they treated him, they treated him like he was a giant.
I mean, at the end of the day, Terry Gordy is one of my favorite big men of all time. I just don't look at him as a super heavyweight. I have a select list on that.
Yeah, which I can understand.
Yeah.
But even some of the people who we have on our list, like a Bam Bam Bigelow, I know he's 400 pounds.
Yeah.
But when you look at him next to an Andre or a Big John Studd...
Okay, so that's the thing. To me, once you hit that 400-pound mark,
then you're
I'm including you in there.
Gotcha.
Maybe that's silly, but that's,
No, and I can see that.
And that's why the super heavyweight, there probably is a definition somewhere, but when people think of it, Dave, your line is 400.
400
For some
pounds,
people, it's just that guy looks sizable.
Because I've heard people talk about super heavyweights and they talk about The Undertaker.
Sure.
And
yeah. I don't.
I mean, he's not even 300 pounds.
No, I don't classify him on my list.
Yeah, that's
one of the great big men, one of just the great competitors of all time, one of the great characters. But super heavyweight, there's a special select few I have when we start talking about what that means, and then the category of great super heavyweight.
And I think the only reason I include Terry Gordy is because I remember him in that time period, the announcers talking about him as a super heavyweight.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely very arguable.
Yeah.
This is taking away nothing from Terry Gordy.
Yeah.
Believe me, and if I thought the guy was shit, I would tell you he was just shit, but I like Terry Gordy. So I'm not going to knock Terry Gordy. I just, for my classifications, he doesn't meet my super heavyweight requirements.
Now, I think our other thing that's going to run into our discussion today is the ability of super heavyweights today compared to different time periods in the
This is a big factor on my list on why certain guys were top.
Yeah, because there are some people that, like I know you have Abdullah on your list, and Abdullah is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. But when it comes to just athleticism with other super heavyweights, he just never had that athleticism.
Very limited. He was a sizable guy that had a brawling style that was more he could come out in the crowd and terrorize you in addition.
Great aura.
Not a terribly athletic or not known for his moves as much.
Well, the funny thing is, one of the people that are on our list, and we're going to discuss even more as we go on, is Andre the Giant.
Andre
the Giant. We saw him. He was no longer.
And when we watched him, he was on his decline in ring wise.
But there was a time period. Not only could he throw a drop kick, but look what he could have other people do. Harley Race suplexed
them, body slammed them.
Yeah, that wasn't Harley Race just picking up 400
Oh, God, no. No one's picking up that guy by himself. Yeah. At the end of the day, Andre was quite the athlete for his generation.
Yeah, and I think some of it becomes a slanted point of view.
And Andre, to me, too, and this is where we're going to, again, as we go further deep into this, too, he was the first, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, no, the first was like Haystacks Calhoun.
He's the first in terms of great super heavyweights.
Yeah, he was the first one that was mobile.
Let's go back to I wasn't going to insult Terry Gordy. I got no problem insulting Haystacks Calhoun.
Well,
I saw his work. It was the shits.
In fairness, also remember, there was a super heavyweight who was working in that time period.
Help me out.
Who actually could work, and that's Gorilla Monsoon.
Okay, Gorilla Monsoon
was before Andre.
One of the all-time greats.
And could move.
No dismissing that. He doesn't make my top 5 because he doesn't beat out Andre.
No, and he doesn't.
And he doesn't beat out the other guys I have.
And in fairness, he didn't make any of our top 5.
No.
Because he's not from our time period.
But goddamn, he got honorable mention,
but hell, neither did the McGuire twins.
They were just shits as well.
Now that we've got our top 5 list to discuss, I think we can move on to the 3 names that were common amongst the list. They weren't on everyone, but Vader popped up on everybody's list. Bam Bam was on both of yours as well as Andre. So going forward, talking about Vader, Bam Bam, Andre probably less known for his agility versus the other two.
Mm-hmm.
What can you guys talk about as far as Vader and Bam Bam's agility?
Okay.
For super heavy.
I'm going to take this real quick, right? Because Bam Bam was the first big guy at 400 pounds I ever saw do a goddamn cartwheel, a drop kick. The moonsault would come later. Hold on about that moonsault. All right, and then the friggin' headbutt off the top rope. The slingshot when he would come out from outside the ring and then splash
outside in.
Yeah, unbelievable speed. Because you had Andre, who was just so massive, but Bam Bam was just the most agile big man I've ever seen.
Well, here's the funny thing about all these guys. Bam Bam Bigelow, for some reason, had trouble as a heel. People wanted to cheer for Bam Bam because of the cartwheel, because of the tattoos on the head, because of his agility. People want to cheer for him, and Vince didn't want to hear it.
And another thing, too, about Bam Bam, despite the fact this guy never had a major world title on him, other than maybe, did he have the ECW World Championship? Anybody know that off the top?
He did. He beat Taz, didn't he?
I thought he did. I thought at one point he did. But one thing about Bam Bam, too, that some of these other guys, Bam Bam was in a WrestleMania main event.
Yes.
It might not have been the best main event of all time, and he might have had to do the job to some coked-up football player.
Andre had a pretty good main event there, too.
Well, Andre had a very good main event. I'm not. Remember, we're going to go with who my number 1 to 3 is. But on that flip side, not to
Bam Bam made that coked up football player. We're not going to mention any names.
No, allegedly coked up football player.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I don't know.
But let's face it, he made LT look pretty good in that.
Goddamn, he did. Yeah. But okay, so if Bam Bam was the most agile big man I'd ever seen, well, then came Vader. All right, Vader, who was bigger, and Vader was the first guy at that size I saw do a goddamn moonsault.
And Vader was scarier.
Vader would beat the shit out of people, too.
Yeah, Vader would come in there and throw those.
I don't know if that should be a plus, but it meant something to me.
Even if he wasn't, if those were working punches, those are the best looking working punches I've ever seen.
I don't think they were all working punches. He was beating the crap out of people.
That's oh my God. He might be the first one other than Abby that really scared me.
Yeah, Vader was truly the mastodon.
Oh.
So we're trying to find out who's our number 1 out of these guys.
Well, we're working our way down. I mean,
you got Andre.
Yeah.
To me, Andre has the most legendary status.
Oh, absolutely. Andre will always be the legend. Documentaries. When's the last time you saw that Vader documentary?
Right. Exactly.
Right. To this day, he's been dead for 20 years. He died in 1993.
So we got Andre.
He's been dead for 26 years, and they came out with a documentary on his life last year.
We got Andre Vader Bigelow. Let's start eliminating here. Let's go like that. So if it starts with me, I love him, but I'm taking Bam Bam out first.
Oh, God. I think you have to take Bam Bam out. He does have that main event with Lawrence Taylor that we talked. I'm sorry, we weren't mentioning his name. With that allegedly coked up football player.
Right.
But other than that, he never really held a big belt, whereas Vader is your former WCW multiple-time world heavyweight champion.
Main events with SummerSlam.
Main events with Ric Flair. I mean, to this day, people remember, even though Ric Flair got the win in the match, him bloodying the hell out of Ric Flair.
When it comes to major national promotions getting behind you, they just didn't ultimately pull the trigger on Bam Bam like they did Andre and Vader.
Joe, what's your feeling?
I would have taken out Andre first, with Vader and Bam Bam being more agile.
Sure.
But since you guys both came down to Bam Bam, we'll take him out and we'll leave the debate between Vader and Andre.
It's called democracy, people.
Goddamn
It's
right.
called democracy.
All right. The two old fucks might have something here. Unfortunately, I'm thinking about that.
Get my walker. I'm going after Andre.
So, all right. I think I already made my feelings kind of clear. To me, Andre's the original. He's the guy ultimately people got behind more. Joe's obviously going to disagree with me on this. Where do you fall, though?
I'm going to surprise a lot of people on this because it's Vader time. To me, Vader's the best big man of all time. What he actually could do in that ring compares to nobody. And don't get me wrong, I have the utmost respect for Andre. Sure. I saw Andre as a kid. I remember going to an actual parking lot for automobile sales, and Captain Lou Albano and Andre the Giant were there. And I remember looking up at Andre and thinking, holy crap, this guy's big. And it was absolutely amazing. But I just can't give it to Andre.
Oh, okay, but hold on. So we're going to... I want to make this kind of clear a little bit too. We would both agree that Andre was more over in terms of national promotions getting behind
If we're
him.
talking about being over, if our category
I know.
is the most over big man of all time.
That's
Andre
not
the
where I'm
Giant
going with
hands
this,
down.
but he's got that. So that was kind of our category for eliminating Bam Bam. But I want to say what you're saying is that Vader closes the gap a little more than Bam Bam on Andre and that,
And that's
and
what
then
I'm saying.
oversaddles him so much in the athletic
That's
ability
actually
and size.
exactly what I'm saying.
All right. Joe, but based on the fact you were already going to eliminate Andre.
I would have to give it to Vader because in my time at least, if I'm picking a big man, Andre was huge, but he was also very limited in what he could do. Vader, I would say up until the end, still could pull out a degree of athleticism. He wasn't as pretty near the end, but he did pull off a match with Ospreay within the last 5 years.
And I will say
He
this.
did it within a year of dying.
Yeah.
I will say this. When we talk about closing the gap, as opposed to Bigelow on, the fame and being put over the top promotion, there's no doubt that Vader overshadows any of these heavyweights in my eyes in terms of athletic ability.
Yeah.
So I'll go with, I'll even make this unanimous. You've converted me. I will go with Vader over Andre on this one.
Guys, now you might not understand what this means, but I have never actually heard Dave actually willing to be converted on anything. So this is actually a moment that we're going to celebrate.
First episode, bitches.
Somebody popped champagne.
A little bit of bubbly.
Guys, we want you involved in this. We want people. This is the Working Fans Pod. It's not my pod. It's not Producer Joe's pod. It's not Dave's pod. It's our pod as a Wrestling Fan Nation.
Work, motherfuckers.
We want you guys to go on Twitter to @fansworking and also go to Instagram for the Working Fans Wrestling _pod. And please vote and talk about this and discuss. Come up with your lists. If you come up with a list that we want to talk about, we'll put you on the pod, guys. We'll call you up at home, put you on the pod, and we'll bring your list to the next podcast.
We'll do some one-on-one Skype with you guys, huh?
Exactly.
If you like that.
Or FaceTime.
Yeah,
for those
whatever
of
you want.
who
Get
are
on
using
video.
Relatively new technology. But guys, please be involved in this. It is our podcast as a wrestling nation and as a wrestling fandom. And we'll talk to you next time. From myself, AJ Strangebrew.
I'm the Working Fan, Dave.
And from Joe.
We'll see you next time.
Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
Welcome back for another week of the Working Fans Podcast. This is AJ. I'm the former wrestler. We've got Dave, the ultimate fan, here with us. As we do every week, our producer Joe likes to make us sound good and makes us look way more professional than we actually are. As always, you can find us on Twitter, that's @fansworking, Facebook, Working Fans Pod. We've got email where you can reach out to us and please contact us to let us know what you think of the podcast and for any ideas that you might have. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram where you can keep up with us at workingfanswrestling _pod. And then you can now listen to us on all major platforms, including Anchor.fm. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, and you can actually check us out on YouTube. Now, it's important when you go onto the Apple Podcasts and YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a rating, let us know what you think so you can help us out and we can continue to do what we love and bring you guys in as fans.
Well, I didn't expect bombshell news on the show today, but we're going to go to our top segment, the 531, where each of us bring our top 5 list on a subject, what's common or what we debate down to 3, then we pick a top 1. This week, it's the top 5 women who changed wrestling as we know it. Now, for my top 5, I'm going to give it to you right off the bat. I had Chyna, I had Paige, I had Awesome Kong, I had the Bella Twins because they started out as one egg, so they're one person to me.
Yep.
And Taya Valkyrie. AJ, who's your top 5?
I actually, for my top 5, I have Medusa. I don't think she gets enough credit, quite frankly. She is one of those people who really was the first extremely athletic females that I saw wrestle. She did a different style. She wasn't going out there to look pretty. She wasn't going out there to dance around. She was going out there to be her own person. Awesome Kong, I agree 100%. I think that when it comes to just being able to manhandle other women and take wrestling to a different style, that she is just above and just so athletic. She's lost some of that now, in my opinion. But the original incarnation, to me, she was just extremely athletic for that size. Trish Stratus. You talk about the Bella Twins. To me, she's the original of the Bella Twins. She was that person who was a model, could be absolutely gorgeous on the cover of any magazine, and she just wanted to wrestle. And she went from being eye candy and barking like a dog to being able to wrestle at WrestleMania and be a great women's champion. So I'm always impressed by Trish Stratus. I can't spell this one. Please don't ask me to. Hiro Okuto. I believe I'm saying that right.
She was married to Kensuke Sasaki?
Yes, Kensuke Sasaki's wife. You talk about original innovators and being able to actually wrestle and put together matches that other matches on the card might be fake, but I just watched her almost take a lady's head off. That's the kind of match she was having where it made you think this is real. And that's just absolutely incredible and a step above to me. My number 5, I think this is probably going to be the most shocking just because she's so new. But to me, you got to put Tessa Blanchard on there. Tessa Blanchard is so incredible in the steps that she's taking right now. And I'm not going to even talk about her lineage because to me, her lineage at this point in her career doesn't even matter anymore. What does matter is every week she comes out, she's competing with guys now, and nobody's going, hey, I don't believe this. She's whooping those guys' asses.
Now, we have this list here this week. It's top 5 women who have changed wrestling.
As we know it.
As we know it, right. I thought, now this isn't much different, but top 5 most influential women in wrestling. So this is kind of the same thing, but I had a little different slant on that, all right? Because we're talking about 5 top women who influenced women wrestling, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So my number 5 pick isn't even a wrestler. All right. I went a little different with this. All right. Cyndi Lauper. Hear me out. Because Cyndi Lauper was responsible for the Rock and Wrestling connection, and she put Captain Lou Albano in her interview, thus creating the feud with Randy Wichter and Fabulous Moolah, which was on the first WrestleMania, and created a ton of buzz. They were trying to book Randy Wichter like Hulk Hogan at that time. It didn't work, but they did try. Cyndi makes my number 5.
I see your logic, and I see your true colors.
Good. Now, we're going to continue that. So, number 4 to me was Wendy Richter, because she had to actually perform. She was actually the woman in the match. All right? That being said, they're kind of neck and neck in that opinion, because I put them in there for the same reason, basically. Now, my number 3, Becky Lynch. I mean, she was in WrestleMania. She main evented. She main evented WrestleMania, and it's funny because I remember having a conversation last year with a couple kids at Takeover, and I remember they were talking about how Becky was possibly going to turn heel, and I was with a friend of mine, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't really see that." And I was kind of in and out of wrestling at this point, maybe just like keeping up with things, and then I realized, oh wait, these kids are actually smarter than I am. They're focusing on the product a lot more than I am right now, and they're right. And then I just saw this groundswell for Becky. Like, it just came out of nowhere. And Becky Lynch was the hottest commodity in wrestling last year. And she main evented WrestleMania. So she's my number 3. My number 2, though, is Ronda Rousey. Because despite the fact she only had a cup of coffee in WWE, they ain't main event in WrestleMania without Ronda Rousey. She was a difference maker, and she took the shit seriously, unlike a lot of other celebrities. Yeah, I'm not putting Charlotte Flair in that list, by the way. She's not my number 1. Ooh. Now, she might be the best worker of that group, and she could be one of my favorites, but that's not what this is about. My number 1, ultimately, is Fabulous Moolah. 28 fucking years, that bitch carried women's wrestling forever. And none of you guys put her on the goddamn list. I will say this, Joe, as soon as you said China, I realized I fucked up and should have had her somewhere on my list. So, that being said, let's break this down.
Yeah, with my list, I tend to look at it as ladies that actually did change wrestling. Like, Chyna was the original Tessa Blanchard, where she was wrestling in men's divisions as an equal. Paige, she came out at the start of the current women's revolution, and really, I kind of think, set a precedent for the style of wrestling that came forward. Awesome Kong, just a bruiser in her time, holding it down for a company that I would say has a shaky women's division as time has gone on. Dutch Mantel had high hopes for the Knockouts division. They had Gail Kim in there. They had some real talents. They've had some real duds. I only put the Bella Twins on my list because they've led the current social media push. Yeah. They're huge on that. They've gotten young fans in through that. They were one of the leaders in reality TV. They had a show early on, bringing wrestling to a bigger audience. I get it. And I had to pick Taya because she came out of Canada, unknown, went down to Mexico, has made a name for herself, and she has been reigning in a place where Tessa is only starting to break into.
So I guess my question is, who was multiples on our list so far?
Awesome Kong is the only one that I think automatically goes forward. She's on 2 lists.
Okay. Yeah, that's. I gotta tell you, this is the toughest one that we've done so far.
Yeah,
I gotta give it. I'm giving a vote to Moolah just because, to some degree, she did change women's wrestling as we knew it.
For better or worse.
Or did she create the original women's wrestling that we knew?
That's true. She did set up the first model for women's wrestling.
She set up the model that had to be broken.
Yeah, and that's only recently been broken, too, because she was in control of women's wrestling when it was basically still a sideshow attraction with midget wrestling.
But here's my thing. It's game changer.
Okay. Not influential? Because that's what I was going with here this week.
See, I thought it was game changer.
Apparently it was by the time we sat down, so I got that wrong.
So, do you guys want to put Moolah on the list? Is that fair enough?
I know you guys want to, and I'm outvoted. I don't like it because, to me, she's what set up what we needed changed.
Fair enough.
I'm going to keep Moolah on.
How about Becky Lynch or Ronda Rousey? I think one of those two deserves
I think Becky Lynch deserves to be on there, and now I'm going to tell you what I think about Ronda Rousey. I actually think Ronda Rousey is influential, and I think that obviously she brought with her a certain amount of the MMA glory, and she definitely made things big. But I disagree with Dave. I think Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch with Sasha Banks could have headlined WrestleMania just as well as with Ronda Rousey.
To be fair, that's not what I said. I did not say they couldn't headline WrestleMania. I said, at the end of the day, they wouldn't have headlined WrestleMania. Right. Let's break this down.
So we got Awesome Kong and Becky Lynch moving ahead. Who else do we include?
All right.
I think Chyna is worthy.
I think Chyna over Moolah for the 3.
Chyna over Moolah, is that fair enough to you?
I'm going to give Chyna in there. That's fine.
Because to me, Chyna's a game changer. Moolah was what set what was wrong. It's just my opinion.
Makes sense. So now we've got Awesome Kong, Becky Lynch, and Chyna.
Well, okay.
Who becomes a number 1 out of this group?
Out of that group?
Awesome Kong's my first one off.
First one
and
off.
I know she was on both of our lists, but she doesn't have longevity. She didn't really change it for all of wrestling.
Right.
She just had a big effect on wrestling.
I'm going to agree with that. She might be my favorite out of that group, but in terms of like changing things and being influential, out of that group, you got to go down to Becky or Chyna. My only question is...
Fair enough, because Awesome Kong, she really did her time in Impact, and it's kind of if the tree falls in the forest.
Yeah.
So Awesome Kong is off the list. We're down to Becky Lynch and China.
All right, who wants
So
to
what
argue?
matters more?
Who wants to argue for Becky?
I'm still trying to figure out which one I think should be gone. I don't really know. Because here's the thing. So China, all right, changed women's wrestling, and she was part of that Attitude Era, the most successful era in wrestling, but not the most successful era in women's wrestling. Although women's wrestling was great, we had Trish, we had Lita. It didn't last. It fell off. Went back to the models. And Becky brought the shit back.
And you still had bra and panties matches during that time.
By the way, Chyna's the original one, but I want to give an honorable mention real quick to Beth Phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
Beth Phoenix.
Fucking list.
Sorry,
I can go
just
back and
one.
forth. You know what? I could go all day with this list and go change my mind because I feel like Trish was going to be an honorable mention. That being said, on my list, end of the day, I'm going with Becky over Chyna because Becky main evented WrestleMania. That's the tiebreaker for me.
I gotta agree with you. When you take women's wrestling to the main event of a show previously that people didn't think it could attain, I think you gotta give it to Becky Lynch.
Now this is gonna suck. I hate having to agree with you two schmucks. To me, it's got to be Becky Lynch. I hate to say it, but at the end of the day, when it comes to female wrestling, she is the man. I don't necessarily like the moniker the man just due to the fact that women's wrestling at this point has evolved to a point where to me it's just as important to be the woman as it is to be the man. But Becky Lynch at the end of the day has done so much more for women's wrestling itself than Chyna did.
AJ, if they want to give us their opinions, where can they find us?
Well, first of all, I want your opinions. I want your opinions flat out because I want to be able to disagree with them like I disagree with these two. So please reach out to us. We're the Working Fans Wrestling Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at @fansworking, on Instagram at workingfanswrestling_pod, and then you can find us on the email workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. Get those listened to us. Tell us your top fives. We're going to take one fan or couple fans, take your top five, and maybe we'll mix you in here and see why you're wrong. Guys, thank you for listening to the 531 here on YouTube this week. If you like what you hear, you can always find us on Anchor FM, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and on the Apple Podcast where you can subscribe and also give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate you listening. We want your feedback, 531, and if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, we also want you to let us know. And let us know what your 531 would be. Come up with a top 5 and let us know, and we'll tell you why you're wrong. And in order for us to do that, please contact us on Twitter. We're at Fans Working. Facebook page, Working Fans Wrestling Pod. Email workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. It's very important that you actually contact us on these platforms because we want this to be your interactive place to talk wrestling. All right, so that wraps us up for this week. Thank you again for listening to the Working Fans Podcast. So as always, you can find us on Twitter at FansWorking. Our Facebook page is Working Fans Wrestling Pod. We have email where you can reach out to us and let us know what you think also. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, workingfanswrestling_pod. And then as always, please continue to listen to us on Anchor.fm, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, all your major platforms. If you're following us on Apple Podcasts, which we are also on now, and YouTube, please make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps us bring you these podcasts when we get to talk to you and talk with you every week.